Peter, when I look around the room, everything, if I look at something specific, it's made of all these like dots, and there's nothing really to be found. Like I can't hold the same experience. I mean, there's nothing fixed to be found, and I can't hold the same perception at any point. And if I pay attention to something in the periphery of my vision, it's also like that.
Mm-hmm.
Or if I pay attention to the whole thing, it's like that, it's moving, indeterminate. And then there's this strong sense also that there is some fixed thing going on. Like there's some stability in the vision field that at the same time that I'm noticing that all that indeterminacy, there's a sense that there's something stable there that keeps coming, and there's like a belief also that arises that there is something fixed. And I guess I'm wondering, is that sense that things are kind of stable, inevitable, but the belief in it not inevitable, or is even that sense that that there is some kind of stability there? Is that not?
Well, when you see there's a sense that there's some kind of stability,
yeah.
What does that seem to be? Is it just sort of a vague faith, or is there something that it's sort of going to?
I think maybe it's a vague faith. But it seems not so strong because it seems to keep asserting itself.
Sure. Okay. Well, what I see is the only stability I find is in the radiance itself. The fact of the radiance is unstoppable and transcendentally present.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, not present in time or present in circumstances, but just present as a fact.
Right.
But you might say the apparition of the radiance is absolutely unfindable. It's only the fact of the radiance that is sort of what's the word? Eternal or constant.
Right. Yeah, I guess.
I mean, that's one way that I might put it.
Right. Yeah. That fact seems to be there.
Like you might say, the fact of being is an unassailable constant, but when you try to find any one of its expressions, or anything that is, you can't find it.
Right.
And yet that fact is absolutely, concrete, you might say.
Right.
That's how it is. That's how I see it.
I guess when I'm sitting here, if I see back with certain people, I kind of think that they're. If I see back with Greg, for example, if I'm focusing, if I'm actually paying attention to that, it doesn't seem to be anything coherent or specific at all. But then when my attention is somewhere else, it seems to regain some kind of.
Yeah. Well, this is an interesting aspect, which is that solidity and stability and sort of apparent entityhood is most stable and solid when it's not examined very closely.
Yeah.
Which is very much the key to noticing. When we don't really look at our experience too much, it's easy to take it as sort of on face value, as in a simplistic way, as solid, stable, objective, existent. Things persist. Things are pretty much what they are. Things have identity. But this doesn't hold up to scrutiny. It doesn't hold up to really being present with the actual experience and really looking at it more closely. And you see, wow, wait a minute. The details of what is actually being experienced are, just inconceivable.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, all of this seeming simplicity and coherence is out the window.
Even the way they're experienced is all over the place too.
Everything about it, the dimensionality of it. I mean, just everything. This is the fascinating exploration and the fascinating discovery. Is this incredible range of experiential phenomena? Range in ways we don't have language for. Just astounding range of degrees of subtlety, degrees of qualities, we don't have language for it.
Yeah.
But our experience, when we look closely at our experience, it seemed to be very dreamlike in the sense that it can't be pinned down as anything, and yet it is present as amazing sort of nuance and innuendo and qualities and flavors and none of which can be pinned down either.
Yeah. Right. I've been noticing that about, if I pay attention to the feeling tone of any moment, I might kind of think that I sort of feel the way I've felt before or something. If I pay attention to it, it's not actually, subtly unique, and
when we look closely, there's a uniqueness of presentation that is absolutely ungraspable and unsayable. But it's certainly unique, and that uniqueness is already a new uniqueness.
Yeah.
And yet that uniqueness can't even be verified because you can't ever get a hold of it.
Right.
It's just self-evidently the case.
But then it's weird because I see that with every looking, and then at the same time, this thing just keeps asserting itself of that contradicts that experience, like some kind of a belief in coherence or some kind of.
Well, sure, but this is falling back into the mind's assertion. The mind creates these hypotheses, these worldviews, which is its nature. It just spits these things out, and we are in the habit of buying into them and believing them and thinking we inhabit them, a lifelong habit. And as we're in this process of spiritual unfoldment, where we're discovering that this is not actually the case, that we don't inhabit these worldviews that we've been sort of lulled into thinking that we do over the course of our lives, but yet still this mechanism is in place of the generation of these worldviews spontaneously, and the tendency to fall into them is still there, just from a long habit.
So do those keep getting generated, but then one doesn't tend to fall into them?
Yeah, well, they keep getting generated, but ultimately one finds that when it sees what they are, which is just hypothetical views, and at that point they aren't seductive anymore. They're just there. But it's the nature of the mind to spit off all these versions, all these possibilities of like simulations. Like imagine the Pentagon. They spin off like 1,000 simulations a day of the 100 different ways they could invade any country on Earth. So they have all these millions of scenarios in case we declare war on Botswana or something. They have like 30 different invasion plans.
Right.
Just like these hypothetical possibilities of, with this, then we could do this. But they're all just pie in the sky. They're nothing. They're fantasy. And the mind spontaneously does this. It's its nature to do this. But the differences between holding these fantasies as being actual versus seeing what experience actually is, what reality actually is, and that these hypothetical versions are just being spun off within that context as possibilities. And then we inhabit a world of inconceivability that our mind is effortlessly saying is a room where we're sitting and talking with each other, and there's lights on, and there's pictures on the wall, and there's a nice wood floor, and there's chai in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
even though we know for a fact that none of that is actually true. Because what is true doesn't render those so-called facts untrue, but is just so far beyond those facts as to render them, trivial.
Right.
And we ultimately can come to realize this unassailably as our actual condition.
Yeah. I guess I see some of my sort of grosser beliefs and things sort of going away, but then there's these like more short-term, like immediate ones.
Yeah, sure.
But, yeah.
But ultimately, experience verifies for itself what it actually is. If we pay attention to our experience, it reveals what it is very, very profoundly and very nakedly and unassailably.
Peter, yesterday I was listening to one of the previous satsangs about, we were speaking about the here-ness and just be with the here-ness.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was exploring that in my field, my data field, and I thought, well, now the data field has so many different objects and textures and forms,
Mm-hmm.
and so I wasn't able to experience the here-ness because it would be a huge data field. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about it.
Okay.
Help me.
And yet the data field, to the extent that it is a data field, has presence.
Mm-hmm.
Or it wouldn't be here.
Right.
So that very presence, the very fact that it is present in your experience, in the way that it is, and this is a very important point and a subtle point, in the way that it is its here-ness. But here-ness is kind of a koan because it's not a simple thing. It's ultimately, inconceivably subtle and paradoxical, because it's unassailable that your present experience is present, right? It is, in other words, you are experiencing something, right? Experience is happening, and that happeningness is its here-ness, its presence, the fact that it is in your experience, right? But then we look at, well, what exactly is this here-ness? What exactly is this presence? In what way is it here? And all of a sudden, it's very subtle and interesting exactly what we find there. It's not a simple thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's what I found. It's not a simple thing.
Yeah, but that's the point: is to be with it, and then when we're with it, we discover, well, yeah, but where is it? What is it? How is it? And all of a sudden, it opens up and reveals that it isn't simple, that it is subtle, which reveals the subtlety of reality, which reveals the subtlety of what we are. With this amazing openness that is both completely obvious, completely present, and yet ultimately unfindable, indefinable. It doesn't settle into a simple identity or into a simple quality that you can sort of isolate and get your hands on, so to speak, and just say, yeah, this is it. It's obviously here, right? There's no doubt experience is happening, right? It's here, it's present, and yet And you try and look and see, well, exactly what is that? Exactly what is this presence? Exactly what is this here-ness? Where's it coming from, or so to speak? Whereas, just all of these kinds of notions, we look at it and, oh, well, wow, this is kind of subtle, isn't it? It's kind of trippy. It's kind of strange. And that's beginning to see what it actually is.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, that question and that you just raised about where is it coming from is something I was looking at just a little while ago, and I can't find where it's coming from. I mean, you described it in my mind. I felt this picture of this fountain or the sparkler, and then where's the sparkler emanating? Is it here? Is it there? Where is it? And it doesn't seem to be findable.
The relationship is very subtle. If you close your eyes and stay with that visual field very precisely for a while, you'll notice that there's, in one sense, a kind of a black background, and at the same time there's inconceivable little flashes or something. And then the question is, well, what is the relationship between the flashes and the background? They, in a certain sense, they're coming from it, but on the other hand, you can't actually catch anyone coming from it or going back to it. So it's subtle, it's trippy, it's interesting. And again, this reveals that what's happening here is not a simple thing. It's not something that you can just get, oh yeah, I see how it is, it's like this, yeah, okay, cool. It's like, there's a strangeness. There's a weird, paradoxical, magical, factor in there that reveals itself when you go really trying to pin down exactly the mechanism of, well, there's this shining from everywhere, say, but what exactly is it? Is it a shining? What's it shining from? Is it coming from something? Is it going to something? Is it appearing? Is it disappearing? And all of these simple questions prove not really to be answerable in any simple way. And yet, pursuing them reveals the strangeness and the open-endedness, and can lead to even more subtle experience of the same paradoxes and the same mystery. So we have we're always faced with the self-evident fact that this is here, as it is very obviously. Just experience this right here. It's very obvious. It's bang. But then when you go look at it more carefully, more precisely, it's like
you can't find where it comes from.
You can't find anything about it. You can't find anything about it. Ultimately, you can't even find if it is. You look for its isness, which is completely self-evident, and what exactly? Okay, it is. Yeah. Okay, sure. Obviously, but what do I mean by that? And
but then you go
the strangeness is revealed.
Touch my leg, and yes, I can touch my leg.
You can touch your leg, but again, so you touch your leg simplistically, and okay, what exactly is touching my leg? And again, the same thing happens. It's like, what's really happening there when I do that? So simplistically, when we don't look too closely, everything is matter of fact, and yeah, of course. But then when we look a little more closely, we step into a bottomless
Makes you dizzy.
Pool, yeah, a bottomless pool of unfindability, of irresolvability, of ambiguity, of indeterminacy. And yet it's something, it is, and yet saying it is is begging the question what exactly is.
Yeah.
And, or saying it's something, okay, yeah, it's something, but what exactly is something? And again, and this is exactly the point, to notice that this is what it is, in the way that it is, but that is not a simple condition. Or you could say it is a simple condition, but it's a quality of simplicity that is alien to rational thought. And really the point is to notice that, to really be with this as it is.
Kind of gets me tired.
Yeah. Well, it does. It does at first because you're looking for it in the old modes of trying to find something.
Trying to hold it.
Yeah, you're looking for it in the old modes of trying to hold it, trying to find something, trying to resolve it.
Something to grasp.
And the looking ultimately reveals that you need to develop new modes of not grasping, of not holding, of just looking, like falling into bottomlessness as a mode. Which is doable and is actually ultimately not tiring, and is ultimately the only thing that's ever happening anyway, is just sort of falling into bottomlessness. But noticing that that's the case is the point, rather than holding it to be real in a simplistic way, and then there's a sort of a stuttering thing of losing it and holding it, losing it and holding it, because you can't actually hold it. But you can ignore it's like when you blink, you ignore the fact when you blink the world disappears, because you sort of ignore it. You just censor it out of your noticing. And likewise, we censor out the ungraspability of reality out of our simplistic relating to it. We censor out all the parts that don't fit, all the weirdness. And the point of this is exactly the opposite of that. The point of that is just to notice the weirdness, see what the actual quality of this actually is in itself, in its own nature. What is this that's going on here? And when we see what this is, we find what we are. And it turns out to be a whole lot different than any simplistic idea of, I'm Peter and I'm a human being and I live on Earth and it's like none of those terms turn out to be meaningful even in the slightest in the face of what this actually is. But it's what we actually are. So then you're with what's really going on here as it is, rather than just living a stick figure cartoon version. Or trying to, which is ultimately dissatisfying because it's unreal, it's not true, it doesn't click.
Peter, here's a question from the internet. The question is, does Peter think that it is possible for one to have two senses of awareness happening at exactly the same time?
I think that the nature of awareness is such that you can't really quantify it numerically. Awareness isn't one or two or many or none, or what awareness is very strange, and it's not necessarily integrated in any simple way or coherent in any simple way.
Right.
So in other words, I think awareness can be all over the place. And whether that constitutes two-ness or many-ness, we can leave to the philosophers.
Simultaneous is a concept.
Here's a follow-up question, same person. Question is, would Peter agree that mystery can be known because it isn't?
Mm-hmm.
Mystery can be known because mystery is the case. Whether that being the case is said to be is or isn't is, again, we can leave to the philosophers. But it is the case. Whether that is being the case is and isn't or is kind of trying to pin down the unpinnable. Since it is mystery, whether it is or isn't may be unresolvable. I mean, that's really the, in a certain sense, the biggest question, And is this or isn't this? And in what way is that question irrelevant? And when you get to penetrate to the irrelevancy of that question, you're really being with this rather intimately.
Getting back to Jeffrey's point, what you were saying to Jeffrey was that you have to learn new ways of appreciating this.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me that there might be useful steps down that path.
Sure.
You got any idea of suggestions for like the first step, second step?
Well, the first step is looking with greater presence and greater detail at what's actually present in experience, and that will have a sort of a twofold effect: a positive, you could say positive and negative effect. As a negative effect, it'll be very destabilizing of your prior worldview, and in a positive mode, it'll be suggestive or have implications of other approaches. I mean, I think that trying to formalize these things is, well, dangerous is much too strong a word, is a slippery slope, because I think that ultimately this reveals its own. I mean, this ultimately experientially answers that question by trial and error. And I think that is probably the surest approach. I mean, one could probably come up with sort of, a sort of a recipe of progressions of being with this, but
Then you get religion.
it's a little iffy because I don't think it's linear. I think once we break beyond a really simplistic worldview of just sort of solid, objective, coherent entityhood of experience, then there's kind of alternate possibilities of ways of seeing it or holding it or being with it that aren't necessarily serial.
Yeah.
And one might go here, one might go there, and one who went there might end up back here at some point, and one who went here might end up somewhere else. And so I think it's sort of more of a random access kind of a thing.
So really one sort of suggestion is not actually going to lead you necessarily to where you think it's going to work.
I don't know. Yeah, and that's the danger. Is if you have any kind of expectation or preconception, it's liable to be self-fulfilling and ultimately dampen down the process. I always think it's the trick is to notice, let it open up, and then go where it's going without expectation, and then to whatever extent you're capable, see where you are, and that process by itself is sort of self-educating and self-revealing, and will tend to be unique, I suppose, for each individual at different times or whatever.
So a suggestion like meditate doesn't necessarily, may or may not be useful.
Absolutely. Because of course it depends what you mean by meditation. If by meditation you mean be with this experience and let it reveal what it is, and I say, yeah, that's always the plan. That's always the recommendation. But even trying to pin down exactly what I mean by that is dangerous, or is potentially confusing, because it
doesn't sound like a general description of meditation.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, most meditations are more or less structured, or at least definable in the sense that you can be meditating and then not meditating. I mean, there's a difference between not meditating and then meditating, and that's very iffy, because if you're meditating and meditation is meditation, fine. What about when you're not meditating? What's going on then? And that's, to me, that's really mind-boggling. I mean, it's confusing as hell. What's happening now is the interesting question, and it's always relevant, whether you think you're meditating or not, whether you're awake or asleep, whether you're alive or dead. The question is, what's happening now? And asking that question and approaching it as intelligently and presently as you can is what I would define as true meditation or true inquiry. And there's not even a series of answers, or let's say experiential answers. The question of what's happening now is always going to evoke a different answer, or a different experience that will yet be revelatory.
And that actually is the solution as well as
Yeah.
the question.
Yeah.
So when you're talking to an individual, because I encountered this and I don't know, I feel like I can see what an individual, where an individual is going, and I think I can offer a suggestion. But the suggestion I offer is very different to one I'd give to anybody else.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't have confidence in my suggestion anyhow, so because I don't know where that's going to go.
But that's true.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I mean, I experienced that exact same thing. I have a certain degree of confidence because I trust the process of exchange, because there's a kind of a feedback. If I say something and the person I'm talking to goes, huh? Then I can ask if that connected, or there can be a follow-up question, and that establishes a sort of a resonance of meaningfulness of the ways in which it took. But also, I've found that my intuition sort of has some validity, and so there seems to be a sense of some degree of be able to be responsive in a meaningful way to people.
Yeah, I've observed that.
About him or you?
I'm sorry?
About him or you?
About him, no, not about me. I don't have that intuition.
But don't you think it's true that even when somebody, when they seem to look at you with it may just be a response of processing.
Absolutely.
That it's tapped on something that's beyond any reference point they have, and so it could be the thing that really does shift something.
Sure, totally.
So it's the process in a bigger scope, if
Absolutely.
you will, that works on its own anyway, regardless of what we think about it.
Absolutely.
Confidence
A
not
miss may
required.
be a direct hit.
Yeah. Confidence not required, right? Thank God.
I think I got that one too.
Let me check this with you, Peter. I've been having this experience, I guess you could call it, of loss. But it may have some tinge of regret or something like that, but that's not the main thing. It doesn't seem. It seems like just loss, like it's gone.
Right.
And there's a kind of, like I said, there's a little bit of a what happened kind of feeling.
Yeah.
Is that in the direction of this new mode quality?
Yes, exactly so. Because you're used to relating to things as a certain having, and as you're experientially having evidence that that's not the case, that everything goes, or is not here in some sense. In terms of the old mode of sort of having, that feels like loss. It translates into loss in that old mode. But in the new mode, it's not. It's just the you might call it the flow of event, or the flow of reality, which by its very nature,
It's almost a kind of ongoing fact.
yeah, exactly. It's an ongoingness that is not, that you can never have, but you don't need to have it because it's always coming. But it's a different mode than having and losing in the old paradigm. In the old paradigm, having and losing is meaningful.
And that
In the new paradigm, having and losing is not meaningful, a meaningful notion, because you never can have, and you ultimately never can lose.
And it seems to be, this experience I'm describing seems to be very corrosive in a way to the notion of having, period.
Yes, exactly.
It seems
so.
to eat it up.
Yeah. No, it's because you're seeing the truth of the new mode, which ultimately will undermine and replace the old mode and just decimate it, render it moot.
It's a little bit stumbly along the way.
But there's always a tendency, because of habit and just history, of going back to these old modes and looking from them. And as we look from the point of view of the old mode into the MO of the new mode, there's that gap in translation. Like, oh, wait a minute, this is lost. Or, a lot of times people have an experience of, I'm dying. Where am I? I'm disappearing. Help me, I'm melting, kind of things. And it's not that you're melting; it's that you're seeing what you actually are. That you never were solid. But that feels kind of like a loss relative to the old paradigm where you held yourself to be solid and to be permanent, erroneously. So, I mean, spiritual unfoldment is a very dicey time because typically we're in between two paradigms, more or less, and we're not in the one or the other, and typically the paradigms don't translate the one to the other and vice versa. So there tends to be this seesaw thing of seeing things one way and then seeing things another way, and very unsatisfactorily in either case, because you're looking at things in two very different ways that don't compute in terms of each other. So it can be almost schizophrenic or kind of disorienting.
In terms of, and again, I can see, even as I ask the question, I can see that it's flawed in the sense of the old paradigm. But in terms of being able to do something,
right?
There's a sense that you can let go,
right?
But that doesn't feel quite accurate.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it doesn't feel accurate,
right?
But it doesn't feel wrong either.
Sure.
So what is it?
Well, it again, you can't resolve it.
Oh.
I mean, that's a little bit of a smear between the paradigms.
Yeah.
The goal, the answer is always, in terms of what to do. The answer is always go to noticing. Be with the real-time reality of your experience and let it show you what it is. Mm-hmm. And that's a self-correcting mode that basically eliminates illusion. Because your experience is real. And it is real in the way that it is real, and so being with it will reveal that mode of reality, which is your mode of reality.
Okay, but so let's take like the sense of something existing, or better yet, the sense of I, right?
Right.
Sense of I, it's just like everybody's saying, as I look for it, it's just mush.
Right.
But there's a definite feeling there that does not feel like mush.
Right.
And it doesn't seem to have anything to do with finding anything.
Right. Okay.
So how can one know that? How can is that maybe just another illusion?
Well, you answer that question by looking at it, by going into it really, honestly, and nakedly, in real time.
Yeah.
You just go into it and see what's there. And you may have mixed success. You may go into it and get something, and you may not. It may still feel unresolved. Cool, but just continue. Ultimately, it will reveal itself, and you will because the path of noticing it, the path of going into it, is a kind of a learning curve, and it's kind of a self-correcting mode where the more you do it, the more you know how to do it. So it's not like you go to noticing and bang, you got it, bang, I know what everything is, I just see it, it's just bang. It's like it's almost more like peeling layers of an onion where you get, wow, wait a minute, there's more here than I thought. And then that's sort of the first revelation, and then you go to that and but that's not what I thought it was either. And so it's this progressive sort of a learning curve. You learn how to do it by doing it. And you get really good at it, ultimately. And at that point, then you can tackle issues like I and these kinds of things with more authority. So just keep looking, but don't be disappointed when you look and you don't get sort of like, okay, yeah, that's it. Now I got it. It's like just look, and if it's still murky, cool. Just relax, play with it, come back and revisit it, and every time you'll be peeling a layer of the onion because you're developing facility, you're developing comfort and intelligence with an entirely new mode of being.
Well, that's sort of the relax is sort of like let go.
Yeah, relax, let go, sure. Could be said to be aspects of that whole thing. It's relax, let go, but it's also engage in a way that we're not consciously used to engaging. you're engaging with the hyper-intelligence, you're engaging with the inherent intelligence, which is not something we're used to doing or even thinking we can do.
That's kind of let go too. Let
is.
go in a.
It's kind of let go, but it's not. But saying let go is simplistic, overly simplistic.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's its own thing. We don't have language for it.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's self-revealing and self-correcting. So just by doing it, you will get what it is that you're doing.
But you said that the first thing is to go and realize that there's more to it than you thought there was.
Maybe.
My experience is that never goes away. There's always more to it than you. Well,
Right.
you give up trying to guess or assess what there is, but there's always more.
Yeah. But what the particular version of the more seems to be at the time will refine itself, and also your ability to appreciate the moreness of that more also refines and deepens his experience.
It's a never-ending.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. Bottomless free fall. Turtles all the way down, except for the turtles part.
Peter, here's a question from the internet. Person asks, is direct seeing sort of a moment-to-moment choice, or is there like a point where you can't not see it, even if you try?
Yes, the second. Well, both actually. There's a point where you cannot see it even if you tried, because direct seeing is the actual event that is always happening. Mm. And noticing that is the case could be said to be what you might designate as being direct seeing that's designatable. But when you see that is what's always the case, and you finally get that, wait a minute, this is always the case, it can't not be the case, then obviously that's something that you can't not be doing. To not be direct seeing would mean to not have experience, to not exist.
Right.
Because existence equals direct seeing. Experiencing equals direct seeing, and that is obviously the fundamental event, the fundamental fact.
Here's the question that I have. When we first opened this dialogue, there was a long silence, and in that silence I could, to some extent, I could see what was outside me, and I could also see that there was this strange energy, sort of more localized here, that's supposed to be me.
Right.
And I could also see that awareness was inherent in what was happening.
Good.
It was all sort of a piece.
Right.
And I thought, well, whatever's happening here is speaking to itself in a way.
Yes.
This is its own download to itself.
Yes.
For its own reasons.
Right.
And that's about all you can say about it. I mean,
that's pretty much the mother lode right there. Yeah, that's pretty much the whole shooting match.
Is it always? Is that the download, or is it always the download, but you don't notice it?
It's always the download, regardless of the degree to which you notice it. And the degree to which you notice it or not is also the download.
Right. But you don't know what's being downloaded because it's just it's its own thing happening.
Right. You have to see what it is in its own terms. As long as it's something that you think you can know or not know, you're missing the point. It's not that quality of event. It's not something that can be known or not known, delineated or not delineated. It's something wholly other. It's none of the above.
Right.
And the point of being with it, the advantage of being sitting in silence like that, is to notice that, wow, this is really happening, and I can't say what it is. And not being able to say what it is not a failure. It is noticing the quality of event that it is, which is a quality of event that is undesignatable and is beyond designation, beyond the need for designation, beyond the relevance of designation entirely. It exists as itself, and the more we are with itself nakedly, the more we see what that is. I mean, this is the discovery of the inherent intelligence. This is the discovery of the mode of intelligence that is actually in play here. Let's say
It's like
it's not what we think it is.
right.
It's what it actually is, but it's naked and apparent. So if we are with it and are with it in a relatively unqualifying mode, it reveals itself.
Right, but it doesn't reveal. It didn't seem to reveal a content.
It reveals a content to the extent that there is an actual inherent content. It won't reveal a content in terms of an erroneous idea of you may have a preconception you may have of what content should be.
Right.
It has content, but it has the content that it has,
Yeah.
which may not be a content that you're used to qualifying as content.
Yeah. Right.
So you have to, in other words, you have to be with it as it is,
Yeah.
and learn to let go of your preconceptions and ideas of what it is, or what it ought to be, or what it might be, and
Yeah.
then you're free to see what it actually is.
Yeah. Well, I know that. I knew that there was content there.
Yeah, sure. You can feel it. I mean, it's
Yeah.
obvious that there's just profound content,
Right.
multidimensional, just inconceivable density of content.
Yeah, I could feel that. Every time I tried to sort of dumb it down to what I thought I was looking at, let's say outside of me, I just sort of backed off that
Yeah,
and just let that be what it was,
Yeah.
whatever that is,
yeah,
and let this energy that I keep calling myself be what it is,
Yeah.
and just let the whole thing be what it is.
yeah. That's the mode, You go to it and you sort of see it as something, and then you see that that's a mismatch, and you let go, and then it's just something, and then another sort of surge of, oh, I see it as this, yes, will come up, and then that will sort of subside when you see its partiality. And this is the mode. It's just when you're just sitting in silence, there's this sort of these waves come up of, oh yes, it's this. Even non-verbally and
Yeah.
non-conceptually, even just sort of in any way, just oh, it's this. Oh yes, it's this. Oh, it's this. And they'll just like the waves of the beach, it just sort of come up and recede, and come up and recede.
Yeah.
And they're all modes of this, but this is revealed more fully when the waves are receding than when they're surging usually.
Yeah. Right.
Why don't we take a little break? I think it's about that time. The natives are restless, I can tell. We'll be back, and you online people, we'll be back in 10 minutes-ish or so. We'll see you shortly.
Well, at least for me, in the world of words, can muck it up.
Sure, absolutely.
Jeff, what?
Words by their very definition, by their very nature, are fantasy. They're delusion. They're not. I mean, you watch two people talking about something, and they're talking about something that is unreal, by definition, because words cannot capture reality.
And I can feel myself, I can feel the level of reality from which I speak sometimes. And then the more I use words, the more percentage is that I'm not going to be talking from that real place anymore. And it's a pretty good trick to be able to talk and kind of be steady in that place.
Yeah, that's right. And it's usually down to being more real-time based, more having your words be referring more immediately to present condition. But most of our conversation, just as humans, is about what happened yesterday, what's going to happen tomorrow, what so-and-so said to so-and-so, what happened to so-and-so, all of which is pure fantasy, because you say what happened yesterday, and it's not what happened yesterday, it's your thought about what happened yesterday that is a fantasy. Your thought is happening now, not yesterday. So, talking about yesterday is talking about a cartoon.
It's just talking.
And most human conversation, just sort of watch people chatting in a restaurant or in a, whatever, it falls in that kind of a category where it's people exchanging fantasies. It's like, just as if I was telling you what I dreamed last night, and telling you what you dreamed last night. And even telling you what I dreamed last night is not the dream. It's a fantasy about the dream, which is going to be inaccurate, which is not the dream. So
There seems to be another mode there, though, where I've noticed that you can have a conversation that's, in a sense, about telling stories, but that's not what's actually going on, really. You're actually kind of surfing all of that
Sure.
with
Always.
each other.
Always.
Well, but I guess you're aware of it in some way.
Yeah, always, because even fantasy isn't really fantasy. You know, it's kind of, I would classify it as saying you're having a meta sense, because fantasy is fantasy, but fantasy is actual functioning of the inherent intelligence too. So in other words, there's more. There's always more. There's always another dimension or more content than the acknowledged content. I mean, that's why spiritual conversation can be effective, because the words are gibberish. The words are, and yet spiritual discourse can have impact. And this is because there's more. Discourse isn't just discourse. Words aren't just words.
Well, I guess I've picked this up out of going directly to the energy and all that good stuff, right?
Yeah.
But I've noticed that even though you may not know what the meta thing is or what else is being exchanged, that something's being...
Yeah, you don't need to know in any sense. You just need to do.
Yeah, but it feels completely different.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. But that different feeling is the meta sense. That's what I mean by that.
Mm.
And it's not an unconscious knowing or intentionality or rationality or anything. It's like you say, it's kind of surfing the meta.
And with somebody, it has more of a dancing or playful kind of quality.
Yeah.
Than like you're trying to make your point or something.
Yeah, sure.
Or whatever. I don't know. Yeah. Again, there's this quality of, are you doing that? Can you do it? And
But the answer is, it depends what you mean by you.
Well,
You as the individual, Steve can't do shit. But you as the hyper intelligence, is the inherent intelligence, which is the divine, which you are, can do anything a damn well wants.
well, how about somewhere in the middle?
And or somewhere in the middle. Because those two conditions aren't mutually exclusive, of course. In short, nothing is simply itself. No phenomena is simply that phenomena. Any phenomena whatsoever is a misrepresentation of something vastly other.
But in some way, it doesn't matter. That
Oh, it totally doesn't matter. It's that's just a fact. And this fact can be and is exploited intentionally. In terms of, from a spiritual point of view, we can call that magical functioning. When you exploit the fact that things are more than they seem to be, then you can do the impossible.
Peter, there was a comment from the internet. Somebody said, it seems we can't get our hands on it, but we can simply look at the hands and notice, what the heck are these? I find that to be quite a sight.
Good. Yeah. Definitely. And by doing that, by looking at the hands and noticing, that could be said to constitute getting your hands on it.
Good. Peter, it seems like I'm thinking that inherent intelligence is orchestrating this whole event, if you could even call it an event.
Yes, exactly.
Including the feeling that I'm maybe me sitting here and there may be a room.
All that.
All that.
All that in every conceivable possible level of it, in every conceivable possible detail of it, and then some.
Right.
Raised to the power of infinity.
Right. So I guess it's best just to leave it alone.
Yeah, or not. I mean, leaving it alone or not leaving it alone are sort of irrelevant distinctions in the face of this vastness.
Right. But it's not like we're going to find out what it's up to, because it seems like this exploration is just pushing away ideas we had about it.
Well, you won't find out what it's up to in simplistic terms as it's up to this or it's up to that.
Right.
But you can find out what it's up to by discovering what meaningful category of up-to-ness it inherently contains.
Yeah,
What was that
like he said.
Was I pushing it too far?
Just a little bit.
A little obtuse.
Just like it. Just follow me.
A little obtuse.
Can you say that in another way?
Yeah. In other words, the way the inherent intelligence works, it does not work to have a simplistic or an answerable or an addressable what it's up to and that we can address conceptually.
Right.
But it's not completely meaningless to hold that there is some kind of a what it's up to that is in another category than anything we can talk about or think about, a whole different kind of what that we can't even imagine.
Right.
And yet, by coming to know the inherent intelligence more intimately, we can discover what that whatness is directly, even though it's wholly beyond any kind of a whatness that we've ever previously conceived of.
Right. But it may be something like something very, very general, like it's the inherent intelligence is folding into itself. Or
Yeah, but that sounds general in human logical terms, but it may be very specific in its terms, because it has an entirely different logical framework, you might say, inherent. The inherent intelligence, inherent logical framework, you might say its inherent point of view, is completely non-human. And so its notion of meaningfulness, its notion of goals, its notion of what its content is or what its intent is, may be gibberish in human terms or vague or general in human terms, but may be very specific in its terms, in its language, in its worldview, so to speak, in its, let's say, meta worldview.
Right. Yeah.
And since we are that, we can approach that. We can approach that mode, even though it's a very non-human mode and a very irrational, let's say transrational mode of understanding and mode of intelligence. And again, so from human terms it may be complete gibberish or vague or whatever, but still we can go there. We can't bring there here as in human language, but we can go there because we are there. You are the inherent intelligence, so you are vastly beyond human intelligence and human logic. Inherently, you already are. So you can go to that which you already are, that portion, go to, metaphorically speaking. You can become aware of that which you are, which is inconceivably beyond human intelligence, and from that perspective, see what's what.
Right.
See what's up.
But it's not going to have anything to do with people or the earth or...
Well, maybe not directly, obliquely, certainly. Because so-called people and so-called the earth, to the extent that's even meaningful categories,
Right.
Are its production as well.
Yeah, that was another question I had. I mean, everything that I'm supposedly seeing and pushing away as really not what I think they are, like, looking at Greg or people sitting in front of me, and I think, well, I see that, but I really don't know what that is.
Yeah,
I don't know what that is out there.
right. And you won't know from a human point of view.
Right.
You can see from a human point of view that your human understanding of it is not going to work.
Right, yeah.
But you can't see from a human point of view what it actually is.
Right.
But you're not limited to a human point of view.
Right, yeah. But like that interpretation that like that's Greg saying it in front of me.
I'm gonna have to go for a little walk. I gotta go get some fresh air.
That idea that's Steve over there.
That's not Steve.
Pick on John.
Those misinterpretations are provided by the inherent intelligence. I mean, that's,
Right.
those
Provided,
are spot on.
yes.
Sure. Yeah. It generates misunderstanding.
Just to, manifest these fantasies.
Could you shed some light on this, sir?
No.
I see, just like what we were talking about before the
He's
break,
gonna
where
let him learn.
you go into it and you look at it. I mean, you're sort of pulled into it, like you're pulled into part of the sparkler that's looking a certain way,
Yeah.
and then you pull back,
Yeah.
and then you're sort of pulled into it and pulled back.
Yeah.
And
The human point of view is an implication of reality. In other words, reality implies, aspects of reality implies the human point of view. It's just taken out of context as the human point of view, and that's why it's erroneous. But seen in the proper context, it's not erroneous at all. But in the proper context, it turns out not to be a human point of view. It's taking a portion as the whole. It's missing the perspective. But all this is not really important. The point is, because it tends to be more sort of theoretical and conceptual, the point is that just being with your experience as it is will reveal that it is more than you have thought it was, and it will be doing automatically all this that we're talking about theoretically with inherent intelligence and blah blah blah. So you have the actual event in your experience rather than thinking about it and talking about it.
Yeah, I've been experiencing that, looking at Greg. But experiencing the energy in the room, the flows
Sure,
and the waves, and
Yeah. There's so much more in event, in actual experience, than is categorized in a human narration of it, right? Or a human categorization of it. I mean, if you've got someone here to narrate what's going on here, and they say, well, there's X people sitting in a room and they're sitting in chairs and blah, they would like write a paragraph or write a page or write a book about what's going on, and that would be so woefully incomplete in terms of what's actually present experientially here. Because there's all sorts of things that there's just no words for. Language just doesn't even go there. But experience does go there. And so it's a matter of letting go of our semantic approach to experience, our language analytical approach to experience, and being with what's actually there. And all of a sudden there's all of this texture and nuance and value and event that there's no language for it, there's no words for it. And all of a sudden we're completely beyond the human realm. We're in the realm of what's actually present, and that's just scratching the surface.
somebody online asks, since we are that, why isn't it known?
It is known. Mm-hmm. It's known with various degrees of completeness. Anyone's experience is that knowing. But if when we're this phrase spiritually immature, we have a very relatively superficial, relatively incomplete, relatively inaccurate understanding of this knowing. And as we develop a more intimate, a more subtle appreciation of it, as this process we're arbitrarily designating spiritual unfoldment occurs, then we more intimately engage with this actual knowing, and we get to know it more fully as it actually is. We are this, and so it is known. It's always known. Being is this knowing. Experience is this knowing. But notice what that is. And the greater the degree to which you notice what that is the greater the degree to which you're actively and intimately participating in this knowing more profoundly.
Peter, yesterday when I was trying to get in touch with the here-ness and trying to explore it, and I was trying to understand why I was feeling the way I was feeling, and so I was thinking, well, now which configuration is causing me to feel this way? And then I thought, how can I know which experience or configuration has given me these feelings?
Right.
I don't. And then I just thought to myself, well, there's no way that I could ever understand. It's
right.
just if I feel a certain way, that's just it.
Yes.
So there's no.
Yes, we cannot understand what's happening in any kind of linear sense or any sense that we can explain. When I say, oh, I'm feeling such and such because X, Y, Z, it's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. We can't know. We can't know.
Because we don't. I don't make the configurations that are going on in my world.
Of course not.
It's just the Shakti that's.
Yes, and even those configurations are too subtle to even know what they are, let alone to know why they are what they are, or how they've come to be, or what has preceded them. It's a cascade of astoundingly subtle and infinite conditions, qualities that is doing itself, and but noticing that is the case is powerful, because right away we're transcending this sort of very immature mode of thinking we can get a handle on it, thinking we can describe it, thinking we can control it, thinking we can explain it. And then we're being with it as it is, and maybe then we can actually learn something more about what it actually is, rather than being stuck in these really simplistic ways of approaching it that are like superstition. It's like cargo cult or something.
Yeah. But it seems to look a certain way, and that's
well, it seems to look a certain way, and it looks like it does. But then, when you notice very carefully what any seeming looks like, it opens up into more subtlety and more complexity. And even what it seemed to be superficially, you can see is not really incorporating all the nuance that's present.
Yeah. There's a certain amount.
Nothing is simple. Put it that way. Nothing is simple in human terms.
Yeah. And so there, I felt some detachment from all the stuff that was going around.
Yes.
Around me.
Yeah. Because seeing that takes us out of the human perspective, which gives us detachment from that perspective and puts us in the genuine perspective, which is much fuller, more real, more present, and at the same time more mysterious. But the mystery isn't the problem, the mystery is just its quality. Semantically, we may tend to have a bias against this word mystery, because it sounds like, oh, it's mystery means it's not resolved, means the answer hasn't been found, means it's a question waiting to be answered kind of thing. But in actuality, mystery is a wholly positive quality. It's the quality of this open-endedness, this infinity, which is a fullness. It's a plenum. It's a wholeness. It's not, as the semantic subtly implies, it's not a problem or a failure to resolve something. On the contrary, it's the presence of a astounding fullness and vitality and spontaneity.
That's more like seeing the inherent intelligence on its terms.
Yes, exactly so.
So what is the open-endedness quality of the intelligence? How do you define that?
Well, it's not a matter of defining it, it's a matter of really experiencing it as it is, which is that it has a very nature of sort of absolute, it's called absolute connectivity. So it tends not to resolve into simple elements, it tends to open into a connectivity and implication of a vast array of more qualities and more qualities. So it's like a spider web. You pull on one portion of the spider web and the whole spider web is being pulled on. And so there's open-endedness in the sense that any partial portion of the system is open infinitely and connected with all the rest of it. And it's not a finite, it's not a closed system, so it's not like it hits an end somewhere and you've pulled on everything there is to pull on. It's like it just goes on forever, so to speak. In other words, things aren't simple, things aren't limited, things don't have boundaries. Inherently, that's what it is. It's an absolute,
So
foreverness.
Things don't have finiteness.
Exactly. Finiteness is only apparent. It's not actual. You can't find finiteness. It cannot be found. Infinity is the only thing that can actually be found. And the finding of infinity means the failure to find infinity.
Failure to find infinity.
I was just going to say, how could you ever find infinity?
Well, you find nothing but it.
Well, can't you keep hoping to find infinity? I mean, you can go on forever.
Yeah, sure. Hope all you want.
Well, I mean,
Good luck.
but how?
Maybe it's out there. Boldly go. Come to the ends of infinity to find infinity. Somewhere out there, there's got to be something with a boundary on it.
I think what was happening in the beginning was, to me, a perfect example of what you're talking about. Because in the silence that we had, there was this openness of whatever, all this feeling. And then when words started getting to be used, the tendency is to really hone in on these words, and these words are so small in comparison to that openness.
Yeah, words are apparently finite. Words pretend to be finite.
So you start using words, and it's a real slippery slope to think, oh yeah, now I got it. It's all this pointedness as opposed to the openness.
Yeah. Sure. It's like that a lot. You're walking with someone, and all of a sudden they start talking about something they're seeing. And, oh, look over there! I see this. Look at that flower over there, whatever. And it's like, well, yeah, that's there, but what about everything else? If we weren't talking about that, it's not singled out. It's just everything. And in any experiential field, how many potential things are there that you could talk about? How many potential specifics? I mean, there's no end. Like, what could I say possibly about this situation? Anything. And yet, the situation isn't improved or added to by me saying something about it. It's all here, all now. And in actuality, the less it's specified, the more fully present it is. I mean, in a sense, it's not that it's any lesser present when it's being specified, but the specification tends to seduce away from the wholeness in terms of distraction.
That's what I was seeing at a different level than I've seen it before.
Mm-hmm. Which indicates noticing the profound fullness, richness, open-endedness, infinity of the experiential field. It's just so, we can't say it's just so much.
Yeah.
What's the relationship between the third eye and the other two?
Same. The third eye is what sees through the other two eyes. Smart ass.
What? Here's a question.
The third eye is non-spatial perception, which of course is what. So spatial perception is a subset of non-spatial perception. So, ocular vision is an infinitesimally small subset of non-spatial vision, or let's say metaspatial vision, which is what the third eye refers to. Technical terms. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, now this person is we have a good friend of ours, Frank. He says, by going to the energy, we can find oneness, void, radiance, etc. And then we end up back here. How great of a job are we supposed to do if integrating all this duality? Or will it integrate whether we want it or not?
A, there's no duality to integrate, and B, it will integrate whether we want it or not. And C, ending up right back here, is ending up in integrated non-duality, which happens to be where you started as well. Oh, by the way, hi Frank.
We can never be anything but integrated.
Yeah, integration is what we got, or not. Disintegration is what we got.
Disintegration is the fantasy.
I actually think it's more powerful to think that integration is a fantasy.
Well, yes.
I think
They're irrelevant.
I think unintegration is a more powerful, more
Right.
real image of the nature of reality.
Is that use the word
Semantics.
discontinuous?
I use the word discontinuous. I use the word inherently divergent, and I find that a very powerful
It isn't.
revealer of a prime inherent aspect of what this is. Especially as it counters the fantasy we may hold subconsciously that things integrate, that things are whole, that things have a center, a specific, a beginning point, an ending point, and anything you can find. And in actual fact, that proves not to be the case. You look anywhere and you look and this is a powerful indicator of an aspect that is inherent in what this is.
Depends who you're talking
That its wholeness consists of its absolute differentness from itself. So you go looking for it and you find you don't find it. You find difference. Everywhere you go, you never find. It never resolves. It spins off. This is difficult to articulate.
Well, okay, so one thing I notice is that there's I don't know what the word to use here, like a tonal quality to every.
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
I don't know what I mean quite either. I know what I mean, but I don't know what word. You could say a feeling quality, maybe.
Oh, I see what you mean, like a feeling tone.
Yeah, but it's much more than that. It's like meaning itself.
Right. Okay.
Not in a relative sense, but just
right.
When it,
there is meaning, but this is a perfect example. The meaning tends not to resolve into a crystalline coherence or delineatability. The meaning, and I'm not saying it's not present and not actual, but it tends to not cohere into any kind of simplicity. On the contrary, it tends to diverge into complexity, and the complexity diverges into more complexity. Complexity isn't the right word.
It's almost like
it's different in itself.
There's a literal discontinuity in the sense that something,
sure.
At least in the motion of consciousness or something, it's like something is like a something not there, and then but then that new thing, if you will, which is still just this.
Sure. And it's not just temporal discontinuity; it's also spatial discontinuity.
I guess. I mean, yeah. I mean, in my experience, I don't know.
Anyway, I don't think I think it's you reach a certain point of futility in trying to use this as a way of pinning things down, but I think it can be indicative of sort of obliquely indicative of a very powerful aspect of this that I found.
Let me take one more step with it, if I may.
Sure.
It's there's a sense of forgetting, of like something missed.
Mm-hmm.
What is that?
That's its incompleteness. It forgets itself because there's nothing.
Literally forgets.
And forgetfulness is another aspect of this divergence. It's diverging from itself.
That's how there.
It's an aspect of
it's like
incoherence.
that's how there is distinction.
Yes, exactly. That's how there's distinction. It's like the core asymmetry. It is a core asymmetry. It does not come together. It diverges from itself at its core, and that divergence generates all subsequent divergence, all event, all space, all time, all difference.
Well, what is forgetting then?
You're trying to pin it down too precisely.
Well, there's a quality there.
Yes, there is a quality.
That isn't like continuous presence or something.
Right.
The idea-
Continuous presence includes nescience. The very nature. Nescience means forgetting. It means ignoring. It means not clearly perceiving. So that, in other words, there is inherently this is another aspect. You were pinning down another dynamic or particularized aspect of this tendency to diverge from itself. Diverge from itself can mean forgetting itself, can mean ignoring itself, can mean seeing itself as this or that. Can be, it doesn't tend to converge to simplicity, converge to clarity, converge to coherence, converge to an entity. On the contrary, its very nature is to drift apart, like expanding space, expanding universe kind of thing.
And it's sort of, there's something very beautiful and amazing there. Beautiful in the sense of that it's this is creative. The quality of this presence or distinctiveness.
Right.
I don't think it wouldn't be here if it wasn't.
Exactly. Yeah. If it didn't diverge from itself, this wouldn't be here.
That's the distinction.
In other words, it's more like a question mark than it is like an exclamation point. It's a more metaphorical way to put it.
There is only now, so that memory is constantly invalidated because there is nothing to remember.
Right.
I think that for me that's the key for that memory thing, which I think everybody has. That sort of like disappointment in the fact that the memory doesn't quite work because there's actually nothing to remember.
Right.
Well, and how do you know you forgot if you weren't there to forget? How do you know you forgot? How do you know? You must have been there while you were forgetting, right? Doesn't that make sense?
Good question.
But how do you know you ever forgot? And you say, "Oh, I forgot," but you don't really know if you forgot.
Well, forgetfulness is just a way of designating a failure to create coherence in fantasy or in a recreation of event. But then that's not really surprising because there's not really coherence even in real-time event. It's like, how can you remember what's happening now when even now when you're actually experiencing it, you can't say what it is.
That's a good one. But it was so great when it happened.
Boy, you should have been there, man. It was so cool. I think, as far as I can remember. kinds of notions, again, it's like it's spinning off into sort of philosophy and abstract thought. Just being with this very nakedly, just
Much easier.
all of that is inherent in it, and all of that is it can be derived immediately from just the fact of this experience. Is that funny? That's just funny.
We were just saying that when we went on our walk.
But I gotta know really what those little pink things are. What are they?
These are.
God.
Thank you, lady. Oh, what was it?
So you're
It
saying
goes right to the essence.
you're saying it's really gaudy?
Oh yeah, Gaudi.
That too. I mean, look around. God has no bounds, huh? No accounting for taste.
A hilarious hiccup.
They're little locks holding us bound in our illusion of identity.
There you go.
Take them off. Take them all off.
Oh. Eventually, they all come off.
question from the internet. Someone says, since I started noticing life becomes lighter and lighter, is that a normal byproduct of spiritual practice or just another resonant mode or delusion?
Both in a way, but it's definitely a normal result of spiritual practice, a successful spiritual practice, sure. Because when we're in a more ignorant condition or a less spiritually mature condition, life can feel like it's a lot of work, like it's a lot of suffering, like it requires a lot of effort, like it's a thankless task that you can never win, all these kinds of things. And as our spiritual unfoldment progresses, life feels more effortless, less of a no-win situation, less stuck, and in every way easier and less effortful. And literally lighter in the sense that we appreciate the luminosity, the radiance, the joyous presence of experience itself. So experience, instead of being a sort of an opaque wall that presents problem after problem,